Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. It's time for another question and answers session. I was actually quite surprised how popular the last one was. I did it thinking that a few people would find it interesting, but yeah, I was quite surprised. And also at the time I asked for people to leave more questions in the comment section. So I'll try and go through as many as I can. So let's get started anyway. All right, so Zapfan asked, how common is it to have a submarine as a toy on yachts? It's not common. People do have them. I know a few. I worked on a boat quite a while ago that had one. I saw it briefly, and I never saw it get used. There are some boats that actually have ones that you can put people in. At the Monaco Yacht Show, if you look at my Monaco Yacht Show videos from 2017, I interviewed somebody from one of the companies that actually builds these. It's just like a big bubble, and they put two people in it, and it can go down so many meters. So there's a few boats that got those. I don't know which boats. Octopus was involved with James Cameron when he was diving on the Titanic. He didn't do it every time from Octopus, but he did it sometimes, and they had manned submarines for serious, depth down to 2,000 meters, I think they went. So yeah, so they do have them. They're not common. I don't know how many have them, to be honest. I don't know the answer to that question. It's not a good start, is it? So Ben Dover, I hope that's not your real name, but he says he's got a couple of questions. Do the owners have an open account for minor or major repairs? Is there a dollar amount when they are to be notified? And are they notified directly, or does it go through someone else? That's a good question, actually. All boats are different, but generally the working system is that yes, there is a limit that the captain can okay. For most boats, not all boats, some boats, everything has to go through the management company or the owner's representative. But generally, a captain can give an okay up to a dollar figure. Some of the boats I've worked on, the limit has been $5,000. And then anything above that, he has to get approval. It just depends on the boat. Some owners are very involved and they want to see everything. But most of them have a representative, owner's representative. He's the point of contact. So if you want to discuss something with the owner, you go through him. What happens to crew, guests, owners that commit crimes on yachts at sea? The yacht has a flag state. So the flag that it flies on the back, the yacht is generally run under the rules of the flag state. Let's say that the flag state is Cayman Islands. So the laws of the Cayman Islands apply to that vessel in international waters. If you're in the south of France, anchored off Cannes, and something happens on board with one of those people, then generally depending on what it is, like for instance, if a crewman gets found to be stealing underpants from another crew member, then the captain will probably just fire him and send him home. If it's more serious, like assault or rape or murder, for instance, then the most likely scenario is if the vessel's at sea, then the person will be detained. The local authorities in the closest port to where the boat is will be contacted. The boat will dock, and then the police will arrive, and they'll be escorted off the boat and handed over to the police. Guest-wise, if it's if the guests are caught with the silverware in their suitcase, then that's down to the discretion of the owner. Are owners mostly celebrities or big investors or old wealthy families? Most yachts are not owned by celebrities because they can't afford them. Not these kind of super yachts that we're talking about, like 80 meter, 100 meter super yachts. Most of them cannot afford a yacht of that size. There are some celebrities who own yachts on maybe 30 meter. Jerry Seinfeld had a yacht. He built a brand new yacht called Mocha. I believe he sold it now though, so he probably found out how much it costs. But most of them are people you've never heard of. Most of the people that I've worked for, I didn't know who they were until I worked for them. I enjoy your videos so much, thank you very much, and show them around to my friends. We have a question. How do these billionaires protect themselves from pirates at sea or thieves wanting to rob these yachts of millions? Well, every yacht has security, so they take care of those kinds of things. Obviously, the person in charge of security ultimately is the captain, but it obviously filters down to the different crew members who are assigned on those duties. As far as the ship being protected against piracy, for instance, going through the Gulf of Aden or whatever, generally, when that first all started off, I was actually sailing through that area. We had private security came on board, and we paid for private security, armed private security, to come on board. They were all ex-military mercenaries, basically, and they were all very, very highly trained. They had M4s or AR-15 type weapons. David Leader, question, can any yacht cross the Atlantic Ocean? No, any sailing yacht can theoretically cross the Atlantic Ocean because it doesn't need fuel, right? A motor yacht needs to have the capacity to store enough fuel and then to be able to cross by a certain speed before running out of fuel. So you'd have to be able to find that crossing point and be able to do those miles. And I think it's like 2,700 nautical miles. The shortest point, I'm not sure about that though, but it's something like that. Andrew Wilkes, I wonder if there's any trickle down of the wealth to the crew. Maybe leftover caviar and half empty expensive wine bottles at least. Here is an idea. In staff reviews, say that the reason you are late is because your cheap watch is no good, and then they have to give you a decent watch maybe. Trickle down effect, it does happen actually. I was on a yacht a couple of years ago, and the owner had bought some meat from a deli in New York City. Apparently it was meant to be some of the best meat you can get. And he didn't use all of it. And then one night for dinner, the crew had these sandwiches made with this deli meat, and it was amazing. So yeah, it does happen. Also, on a big boat I was on, 120 meter plus boat I was on, they had a spa, as you do. It was full of this product called something Kenny Florian, I think it was. And it was all about to expire within a few months, and the owner weren't due to be back on until after they expired, so they just gave it all to the crew. So they put it on the table in the mess, and they said, well, you can take whatever you want. On another boat, actually, they had, we went into a port, and I think it was in Italy, and they found some alcohol that was in the alcohol storeroom, and they couldn't find any receipts for it, and they said, right, you have to get rid of it all. So they gave it to the crew. So yeah, it does happen. Is it possible to build a yacht which is autonomous, like an autonomous car? Could a computer manage the maneuvers in the port? That's a good question, actually. Autonomous would be an unmanned ship. And then you can have a manned ship that does autonomous things like dock itself. So there's different sections to that. Autonomous ships are coming, believe it or not. Apparently Rolls-Royce is leading the way in this field, but that was from their own website. So whether they're leading or not, I don't know. But it is coming. Wärtsilä, who build engines and automation, they've said that they've successfully done tests where a computer has docked a ship. So they've had people on board on the bridge, and then the computer has docked the ship, which I find amazing. So yeah, it's coming. Ken Nash, do the crew do the laundry for the visitors? Okay, that's a good question actually, because it's something that people don't think about. Yes, the crew, every yacht has a laundry. And usually it's manned by one of the crew, one of the interior staff will be in there. On the big yachts, I've worked on big yachts where they actually have laundry crew. So, and they'd have one in off season and then two in the summer season. And yeah, so they do all the laundry. So you take your laundry down every morning, your uniform or whatever, you drop it off, and then you have pigeonholes, and then you go down in the evening and it's all done. It's in the pigeonhole, pressed and everything. So. As far as the guests, yes, they would also do the guest laundry. And that obviously takes priority over the crew, but they've got all the gear, the steam irons, the presses, the massive Miele washing machines and dryers and stuff like that. So they're very well equipped. Fast as Fox, Knowing what you do, would you want to be super rich? Of course. Easy question. Kirill Borovets, do you know any boats that are self-sustainable for very long periods of time? Water purification plant, some sort of food processing for fish maybe, etc. All yachts can do water. So they have reverse osmosis or RO plants. And when you're at sea, you turn those on. Well, the engineers look after them, turn them on, and they make their own water. So they call it making water. So an RO plant is basically filtration of seawater, is basically water that is filtered and then it's pushed through a membrane. So the water gets forced through the membrane and comes out the other side, and it's clean, and then it's filtered, and that's basically how it's done. That's a simplified version of how it's done. And yeah, so you can produce as much water as you want. As long as you've got power, you can produce water. Food, on the other hand, is a different story. You know, people can fish, I suppose, and then you give them to the chef and he can cook them, but yeah, it's not something that I've ever really seen happen, apart from a couple of Filipinos, you know, generally fishing off the back and cooking it in the engine room, which you're not supposed to do. But I've seen that happen. But it's generally, yeah, you generally don't do it. Some of the owners love fishing, and they actually go out and fish just for the sport, and then when they come back, if the fish are the type you can eat, then they bring them on board and they eat them. So you go into a port and you get provisions, and then you live off those provisions. What is the standard tip for dock employees? There is no standard tip. I know there's a video that I did recently where you can see the captain apparently handing a tip over to the dock worker after he ran the lines. I've no idea. There is no tipping system that I'm aware of. I've never seen that before, actually. I think it was just him being polite, to be honest. So Jamie, are you allowed firearms on board, or do you need to be a diplomat? I don't know about the diplomat thing. No, you're not allowed firearms on board. The problem with having firearms on board, I mean, in the specific circumstance, which like I mentioned earlier, when we were going through the Gulf of Aden, we had private security and they had firearms on board. That was a specific area, and it was in international waters, and the way they had to deal with those weapons was such a nightmare, to get them on, to get them off. And even in that part of the world, which is not as strict on weapons as maybe, say, the EU, to have weapons on board a yacht would be such a nightmare, because every country has different rules about weapons, right? So even in the EU, the UK and France and Monaco and Spain, they all have different laws on weapons. And every time you went into a different territorial water, you'd have to declare that you've got weapons on board, and they would send out armed police or maritime police, and they would want to inspect them, and you'd have to get paperwork done, and it would just be such a nightmare. At the end of all that, some countries might just say you're not allowed to bring weapons in. So now you're stuck, you can't move freely. So no, generally, unless you're going somewhere specific, like if you're going to the Arctic, generally moving around the EU and across the Atlantic and stuff, no, you don't, there are no weapons. Jamie, again, wow, you ask a lot of questions, man. Can the radar be harmful, or is it 100% safe? It's not 100% safe. Radar uses the same as a microwave oven. So you use microwaves to send out pulses, and we all know what a microwave does, right? So they agitate the molecules in the food, and then the food heats up. And that's basically what a microwave does. So, and the radar uses microwaves, so it's not safe. It's safe from a distance. The further are you away from it, the safer it is. The closer to it, like for instance, if somebody has to go up on the mast when they're at sea, they have to call a bridge and tell them to turn off the radar. So you can't go up there because it is harmful. And Dan Random asks, largest aircraft owned by a superyacht owner. Abramovich owns a Boeing 767, unbelievably, which is one of the largest aircraft. I mean, it's an $80 million aircraft, which he runs as a private jet. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave comments below. Obviously, because I'm doing a question and answer, it's going to be a while before I do another one. But if you've got any questions, maybe some questions have come into your head based on what we've just talked about, place them below. And I will do, the next time I do this, then we'll go through these questions. Oh, one other question. I had one person out of all the people, I think my last question and answer did like 50,000 views. One person asked the question, why don't I have any photographs in my picture frames? I thought that was going to be one of the biggest questions. And I still don't have any, like months later. So yeah, good question. I don't know why. I want to be very selective. I was more interested in putting them up and seeing how they looked before I put anything in them, and I still haven't got around to it. So God knows when I'm going to be able to put some in. So, but they will eventually get some in, and I've got more to go up as well, which also don't have any pictures in. So, all right, guys, bye bye.